He walked into his own store and was immediately treated like a criminal, accused of being a thief while trying to buy $25,000 of luxury merchandise. But when this casually dressed customer revealed his true identity, 3 employees discovered they had just destroyed their careers in the most spectacular way possible. Watch as a Black CEO faces shocking discrimination at his own flagship store, gets publicly accused of credit card fraud by his own manager, stays impossibly calm while being threatened with arrest by his own security guard, and then delivers the most satisfying moment of justice ever caught on camera when he reveals he's actually their boss. This isn't just a story about revenge, it's about how one man's courage to expose systematic racism transformed an entire industry and created changes that protect customers everywhere. Stay until the end to see how this viral confrontation sparked a revolution in customer service that's still changing businesses today. Because what happens when corporate security arrives will leave you speechless and restore your faith that sometimes the good guys really do win. He walked into his own store and was immediately treated like a criminal. But what happened next would shock an entire industry and change how businesses treat their customers forever. This is the story of Marcus Williams, and by the end of this video, you'll understand why respect should never be based on appearance. Marcus Williams wasn't your typical CEO. At 42, he had built Williams Retail Group from a single struggling boutique into a 47-store empire spanning 12 states, with annual revenues exceeding $200 million. His flagship Chicago location on Michigan Avenue was the crown jewel of his retail kingdom, a 3-story monument to luxury shopping that attracted celebrities, business moguls, and international tourists. But on this particular Tuesday morning, Marcus wasn't thinking about profit margins or quarterly reports. He was thinking about the 17 formal complaints that had landed on his desk over the past month, all describing the same disturbing pattern: customers of color being followed, questioned, and treated with suspicion at his very own stores. The complaints weren't just numbers on a spreadsheet to Marcus. They were personal. He remembered being followed in stores as a teenager, the burning humiliation of being assumed guilty before proven innocent, the way security guards' eyes would track his every movement while white shoppers browsed freely. He had sworn that when he built his business empire, every customer would be treated with dignity and respect regardless of their appearance, age, or background. These complaints suggested that promise was being broken daily. So Marcus made a decision that would change everything. Instead of sending corporate investigators or scheduling formal reviews, he would conduct his own undercover investigation. He would walk into his flagship store as an ordinary customer and see firsthand how his employees treated people who didn't fit their narrow definition of a premium shopper. The irony wasn't lost on him that he would be testing for discrimination by potentially experiencing it himself. On this crisp October morning, Marcus deliberately chose his most casual outfit: faded jeans, a simple gray hoodie, and worn sneakers. He carried a basic black backpack instead of his usual luxury briefcase, and left his expensive watch and jewelry at home. Looking in the mirror, he saw exactly what he intended: a regular guy you might not give a second glance. No one would suspect that this casually dressed man walking through their doors controlled their paychecks, their careers, and their future. As Marcus approached the gleaming glass entrance of his flagship store, he took a deep breath. The next few hours would either confirm his worst fears or prove that his 17 complaints were isolated incidents. He had no idea that he was about to witness discrimination so blatant, so shocking, that it would not only cost several people their jobs, but would ultimately transform how an entire retail chain operated. What Marcus discovered inside his own store would leave him speechless, and what he did about it would become a viral sensation that sparked conversations about respect, dignity, and justice across the country. If you believe that every person deserves to be treated with respect, regardless of how they look, hit that like button right now. Drop a comment telling us about a time you witnessed or experienced unfair treatment. And don't forget to subscribe, because stories like this remind us why standing up for what's right matters more than ever. Trust me, you won't want to miss what happens when Marcus walks through those doors. Right at that moment, Marcus stepped through the polished glass doors. The atmosphere inside his flagship store felt different than he remembered. The familiar scent of expensive perfume and leather couldn't mask the tension that seemed to follow him like a shadow. Within 30 seconds of entering, he realized his worst fears were about to become reality. Marcus moved casually toward the luxury section, his eyes taking in the gleaming displays of designer watches, Italian leather goods, and Swiss timepieces that generated millions in revenue each year. He had personally approved every fixture, every lighting choice, every detail designed to make customers feel welcomed into a world of elegance. But as he browsed the collections he had curated, he noticed something that made his stomach tighten with recognition and rage. 2 employees had begun their dance of discrimination so smoothly, so practiced, that Marcus knew immediately this wasn't their first performance. Security guard Jake Morrison, a tall man with close-cropped hair and suspicious eyes, positioned himself with a clear view of Marcus while pretending to check his phone. 20 feet away, sales associate Melissa Torres whispered urgently into her headset, her gaze never leaving the casually dressed man who had dared to enter their premium section. The contrast was impossible to ignore and absolutely infuriating. Just moments before Marcus arrived, he had watched through the window as a middle-aged white woman in workout clothes and flip-flops had been greeted with warm smiles, offered champagne, and personally escorted to view their most expensive jewelry collection. Her athleisure outfit probably cost less than Marcus's seemingly simple hoodie, but her skin color had earned her the royal treatment. Now, as Marcus examined a display of Italian leather briefcases, Melissa approached with the kind of forced smile that didn't reach her eyes. Her voice carried that particular tone Marcus recognized from his youth, the carefully modulated condescension that retail employees reserved for customers they deemed unworthy. "Excuse me, sir," Melissa said, her words dripping with false politeness. "Are you sure you're in the right section? These items are quite expensive, and we have some lovely accessories on the first floor that might be more in your price range." Marcus felt the familiar burn of humiliation mixed with something far more dangerous, the told fury of a man who owned everything around him being told he didn't belong. But he had come here for evidence, not vengeance. His voice remained steady, almost gentle. "Thank you, but I'm just looking around. Beautiful store you have here." The irony was so thick it was almost amusing. Here was Melissa earning her paycheck from the very man she was trying to dismiss, completely oblivious to the fact that her target could end her career with a single phone call. But Marcus needed more than condescending comments. He needed proof of the systematic discrimination that was poisoning his business from within. As if reading his thoughts, Jake, the security guard, began following at a distance that was obvious to everyone, apparently himself. Other customers started noticing the surveillance show, their faces showing confusion and discomfort as they realized what they were witnessing. Marcus picked up a Mont Blanc pen, testing its weight, while internally calculating exactly how much money Melissa and Jake were about to cost themselves. What they didn't know was that their boss was about to give them enough rope to hang their own careers. But the discrimination was just getting started. And what happened next would prove that this wasn't just 2 rogue employees, but a systematic problem that went straight to management level. Marcus was about to discover just how deep the rot had spread through his own organization. As Marcus continued browsing, seemingly oblivious to the circus of surveillance around him, Melissa's whispered conversations into her headset had summoned reinforcements. Manager Patricia Chen emerged from the back office with the determined stride of someone convinced she was about to handle a serious security threat. At 52, Patricia had 15 years of retail management experience and a reputation for running a tight ship. What she didn't have was any idea that she was about to torpedo her own career in the most spectacular fashion possible. Patricia's approach was different from Melissa's fake politeness. Her strategy was direct intimidation wrapped in corporate speak, the kind of aggressive management style that Marcus had specifically prohibited in his employee training programs. She positioned herself between Marcus and the jewelry display case like a guardian protecting Fort Knox from a known criminal. The moment that would haunt Patricia for the rest of her career came when Marcus reached for a $15,000 Rolex Submariner, one of their best-selling luxury timepieces. His movement was casual, natural, the way any serious customer might examine an expensive purchase. But Patricia's reaction was swift and humiliating. "Sir, please don't handle merchandise you can't afford," Patricia declared loud enough for half the floor to hear. "These are genuine luxury items with significant value, and we have insurance policies about customer handling." The lie was so blatant it was almost artistic. Marcus knew every policy in his company handbook, and there was absolutely no restriction on customers examining merchandise. He had specifically created policies ensuring that every customer, regardless of appearance, could touch, try on, and fully experience products before purchasing. Patricia had just invented a fake policy to discriminate against him in his own store. But Marcus wasn't done testing the depths of their prejudice. With the patience of a man who had built an empire through strategic thinking, he calmly asked, "Could I see the warranty information and authenticity certificate for this piece? I'm considering a significant purchase today." The request was perfectly reasonable. Any legitimate customer spending $15,000 would want to verify authenticity and understand warranty coverage. But Patricia's response revealed the twisted logic of discrimination in action. Instead of providing the requested information, she reluctantly handed over the certificates while making a show of hovering inches from Marcus's shoulder, as if he might pocket the paperwork and sprint for the exit. "We don't usually provide detailed documentation unless a customer is seriously committed to purchasing," Patricia said, her voice carrying that particular brand of skepticism reserved for people she had already judged and found wanting. "These consultations are typically reserved for our premium clientele." The phrase premium clientele hung in the air like a neon sign advertising prejudice. Marcus felt his jaw tighten as he realized Patricia had just verbally excluded him from the very customer base he had spent 20 years building. Around them, other shoppers began exchanging uncomfortable glances, sensing the toxic atmosphere but not quite understanding its source. What Patricia, Melissa, and Jake couldn't possibly know was that their premium clientele included exactly one person in the store that day, and they were systematically destroying their careers while he watched in calculated silence. No one expected what happened next would cross the line from discrimination into outright criminal accusation. But Marcus was about to experience the kind of public humiliation that destroys lives and careers. The three employees were about to make the biggest mistake of their professional lives, and they had no idea their victim held all the power. Marcus decided it was time to escalate his test to its logical conclusion. With deliberate calm, he selected 3 items that would make his point perfectly: the $15,000 Rolex Submariner, a $1,200 Italian leather briefcase, and a bottle of $800 Tom Ford cologne. The total came to just over $25,000, exactly the kind of sale that should have had Patricia celebrating instead of scowling. As Marcus approached the checkout counter, he could feel the tension crackling through the air like electricity before a storm. Patricia, Melissa, and Jake had formed an unofficial tribunal, their body language screaming suspicion and hostility. Other customers began slowing their shopping, sensing that something dramatic was about to unfold. Marcus placed his American Express Black Card on the counter, the same card he used for all his personal purchases, the same card linked to accounts that held more money than these 3 employees would earn in their combined lifetimes. But Patricia's response revealed just how deep her prejudice ran. Without even attempting to process the transaction, Patricia picked up the card, examined it like she was handling evidence from a crime scene, and then did something so brazen it left Marcus momentarily speechless. She manually canceled the transaction before it could even begin. "Sir, I'm sorry, but your card has been declined," Patricia announced loudly, her voice carrying across the luxury section like a public service announcement. "I think you should leave before we have to involve security in this situation." The lie was so obvious, so deliberately malicious, that several customers stopped shopping entirely to stare. Marcus knew his card was valid, his accounts were flush, and Patricia had just committed what amounted to retail fraud by refusing to process a legitimate transaction. But the nightmare was just beginning. Jake stepped forward with the swagger of a man who thought he was about to become a hero. His hand moved to his radio as he positioned himself between Marcus and the exit, creating a scene that looked like the arrest of a dangerous criminal rather than a customer service interaction. That's when Patricia delivered the accusation that would end 3 careers and create a viral sensation. "We have reason to believe you're attempting to use stolen credit cards, sir. I'm going to need you to empty that backpack and show us what else you might have taken from our store." The words hit the air like a bomb. Thief, stolen cards, what else you might have taken? Patricia had just publicly accused a paying customer of multiple crimes based solely on his appearance. Around them, customers began reaching for their phones, instinctively recognizing that they were witnessing something that needed to be documented. Marcus felt the familiar childhood burn of being presumed guilty, but this time it was mixed with the cold satisfaction of knowing that justice was about to be served in the most spectacular way possible. Patricia, Melissa, and Jake had just handed him everything he needed to transform not just their lives, but his entire company's approach to customer service. If this story is making your blood boil, you're not alone. Hit that like button if you believe every customer deserves basic respect and human dignity. Comment below and tell us about a time you witnessed or experienced discrimination like this, because your stories matter and change happens when we speak up. And subscribe right now, because what Marcus does next will restore your faith that sometimes justice comes in the most satisfying way possible. But Marcus wasn't about to let anger cloud his judgment, because what happened next would demonstrate the difference between a victim and a strategist. While 3 employees thought they were handling a criminal, they were actually providing a masterclass in how to destroy your own career while being recorded by multiple witnesses. Marcus looked at Patricia with the kind of calm that only comes from absolute confidence, the demeanor of a man who had built a business empire by thinking 3 steps ahead of everyone else. Instead of protesting, instead of losing his temper, instead of giving them any excuse to escalate their abuse, he did something that would later be described as brilliant by employment lawyers across the country. "Of course," Marcus said quietly, his voice carrying the measured tone of someone who understood exactly what was happening. "I have nothing to hide." With deliberate precision, Marcus unzipped his backpack and began removing items one by one, narrating each item as if he were providing evidence in a courtroom. MacBook Pro, my notebook for business meetings, phone charger, and my business card holder. He placed each item on the counter with the careful attention of someone who knew this moment would be scrutinized by thousands of people. What Patricia, Melissa, and Jake didn't notice in their rush to judgment was that several customers had begun recording the interaction. A young woman near the handbag display had her phone out, capturing every word. An elderly gentleman by the cologne counter was live streaming to his social media, his face showing disgust at what he was witnessing. A middle-aged couple had stopped their shopping entirely, the husband recording while his wife shook her head in disbelief. But Marcus wasn't done gathering evidence. As he placed his business cards on the counter, he made sure they landed face up, though the three employees were too focused on their discriminatory performance to actually read what was right in front of them. The cards clearly stated Marcus Williams, Chief Executive Officer, Williams Retail Group. But prejudice has a way of making people blind to obvious truths. "Is there anything else you need to search?" Marcus asked, his voice still maddeningly calm. "Perhaps you'd like to check my pockets as well. Or maybe you have some other procedures for customers you've decided are criminals based on their appearance." The question hung in the air like a challenge, and Patricia took the bait completely. "Don't get smart with us, sir. We know your type, and we're not going to be fooled by your attitude." Those words, "we know your type," were captured by at least 4 different phones and would later become a hashtag that trended nationwide. Patricia had just admitted on camera that their treatment was based on Marcus's type, which everyone understood meant his race. That's when store director Robert Kane made his entrance, striding across the luxury section like a general arriving to handle a battlefield crisis. At 58, Robert had managed retail locations for over 2 decades and prided himself on maintaining what he called store standards. What he actually maintained was a culture of discrimination so embedded that he couldn't recognize it even when it was happening right in front of him. Robert's assessment of the situation took about 3 seconds, all of it based on visual prejudice rather than actual facts. He saw a casually dressed black man surrounded by 3 of his employees, merchandise on the counter, and immediately concluded he was looking at an attempted theft in progress. "What seems to be the problem here?" Robert asked, though his tone made it clear he thought he already knew the answer. Patricia jumped at the chance to impress her boss with her vigilance. "This gentleman attempted to use what we believe are stolen credit cards to purchase $25,000 in merchandise. When we questioned the transaction, he became argumentative and defensive." The lie was so complete, so professionally delivered, that Marcus almost admired its construction. Patricia had just rewritten the entire encounter, transforming her discrimination into heroic customer protection, and his calm compliance into suspicious behavior. Robert nodded with the satisfaction of a manager who thought his training programs were working perfectly. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave the premises immediately. Jake, please escort this gentleman out and check to make sure he hasn't taken anything from our displays." The escalation was breathtaking in its stupidity. Robert had just authorized what amounted to a citizen's arrest based solely on his employees' prejudiced assumptions. He had elevated discrimination into potential false imprisonment, adding legal liability to moral bankruptcy. But Marcus had one more card to play before revealing his hand. He pulled out his iPhone and, with movements so smooth they seemed choreographed, activated his voice recording app. The distinctive chime echoed through the luxury section, immediately drawing everyone's attention. "Before we go any further," Marcus said, his voice now carrying a subtle change in tone that made several customers step closer, "I'd like to get your corporate complaint number.
I think your company's executives would be very interested in how their customers are being treated." Robert's laugh was the kind of sound that would later keep him awake at night with regret. "You can complain all you want, buddy. We document everything, we follow procedures, and we know people like you. Corporate will back us up 100%. The phrase "people like you" was the final nail in 3 coffins, captured clearly by multiple recording devices and witnessed by a growing crowd of horrified customers. Robert had just confirmed that this wasn't isolated prejudice, but systematic discrimination that he believed had corporate support. What none of them realized was that corporate was standing right in front of them, and he had just heard everything he needed to transform his entire company's culture forever.
Right at that moment, Marcus decided it was time to end this performance, and what happened next would become the most satisfying moment of justice ever captured on camera. The 3 employees who thought they were heroes were about to discover they had just destroyed their careers while harassing their own boss. Marcus reached into his wallet with the deliberate precision of a magician preparing his greatest trick. The store had fallen into an expectant silence, with customers gathering at a respectful distance, their phones capturing every moment of what they sensed would be an unforgettable confrontation. Even Patricia, Melissa, Jake, and Robert seemed to hold their breath, perhaps finally sensing that something was about to shift dramatically. "Before we continue this conversation," Marcus said, his voice carrying a new authority that made several people unconsciously straighten their postures, "I think there's something you should know about me." He pulled out his driver's license first, holding it up so the cameras could capture it clearly. "My name is Marcus Williams." The name hung in the air for a moment, meaningless to the 3 employees, but causing several customers to gasp as recognition dawned. Then came the business card, the same one that had been sitting ignored on the counter for the past 10 minutes. Marcus held it up like evidence in a trial, reading it aloud with the patience of a teacher addressing particularly slow students. "Marcus Williams, Chief Executive Officer, Williams Retail Group." The silence that followed was so complete you could have heard a pin drop on the marble floor. Patricia's face went through a series of expressions that would have been comical if the situation weren't so serious. Confusion, disbelief, horror, and finally the pale recognition of career-ending disaster. "That's impossible," Patricia whispered, her voice barely audible. The words came out automatically, her brain refusing to process the reality that was unfolding in front of her. Marcus continued with the calm authority of someone who had just revealed he held all the cards. "Williams Retail Group owns 47 stores across 12 states. This flagship location generates approximately $18 million in annual revenue. And you 3 just spent the last 30 minutes discriminating against the person who signs your paychecks." Robert's face had gone from confident smugness to a shade of gray that suggested he might need medical attention. The man who had been so certain about "people like you" was now facing the reality that the person he had insulted was the person who controlled his entire professional future. But Marcus wasn't finished delivering his devastating revelation. He pulled out his phone and, with theatrical timing that would make a Broadway director proud, placed a call that would seal their fate. "Sarah, this is Marcus. I'm at the Chicago flagship location, and we have a serious situation that requires immediate corporate attention." His voice carried across the luxury section, reaching every customer, every employee, and most importantly, the 3 people whose worlds were crumbling in real time. Sarah's voice came through the speaker, clear enough for everyone to hear. "Mr. Williams, should I dispatch corporate security? Is there a safety concern?"
Yes, please send a team immediately. We have employees who have violated every customer service protocol we've established, made false accusations against a customer, and displayed the kind of discriminatory behavior that goes against everything this company stands for. The watching customers began to murmur among themselves, the full scope of the situation finally becoming clear. They had just witnessed something extraordinary, systematic discrimination being exposed and justice being delivered in real time by the one person with the power to make immediate changes. Patricia found her voice first, though it came out as a desperate whisper. "Mr. Williams, I can explain. We were just following security procedures. We had no way of knowing." Marcus cut her off with a look that could have frozen fire. "Following security procedures? Patricia, show me the company policy that authorizes you to refuse to process a valid credit card. Show me the procedure that allows you to accuse paying customers of theft based on their appearance. Show me anywhere in our employee handbook where it says you can demand to search a customer's personal belongings without cause." The silence stretched on because, of course, no such policies existed. Marcus had personally overseen the creation of every customer service protocol in his company, specifically designing them to prevent exactly this kind of discrimination. Jake, who had been growing paler by the minute, tried to salvage something from the wreckage. "Sir, Mr. Williams, we were just trying to protect the store's interests, we thought." "You thought what exactly?" Marcus's voice carried 20 years of suppressed anger at every time he had been followed, questioned, or assumed to be a threat based solely on his skin color. "You thought that a black man in casual clothes couldn't possibly afford luxury merchandise? You thought that someone like me didn't belong in a store like this? You thought that your prejudice was more reliable than your professional training?" The questions hung in the air like an indictment, each one more damning than the last. Around them, customers continued recording, understanding they were witnessing not just personal justice, but a moment that would spark important conversations about respect, dignity, and the assumptions people make based on appearance. Robert, in a final desperate attempt to save his career, tried to shift blame. "Mr. Williams, this was obviously a misunderstanding. These employees were just being cautious, and I'm sure we can work this out internally." But Marcus had heard enough excuses for one lifetime, and what he said next would become a viral sensation that sparked nationwide discussions about respect, dignity, and the true cost of discrimination. But there would be no working this out internally because what Marcus said next would end 3 careers and begin a transformation that would ripple through the entire retail industry. The moment of reckoning had arrived, and justice was about to be served with the precision of a surgeon and the impact of a sledgehammer. Marcus looked directly at Robert, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority mixed with barely controlled fury. "A misunderstanding? Robert, let me help you understand exactly what happened here. You authorized the harassment of a paying customer based solely on racial profiling. You supervised employees who invented fake policies to justify discrimination. You personally insulted me using language that any reasonable person would recognize as racist. This isn't a misunderstanding. This is a lawsuit waiting to happen and a career-ending demonstration of everything that's wrong with corporate culture." The sound of approaching footsteps echoed through the store as corporate security arrived with the efficiency that Marcus had built into every aspect of his business operations. 3 uniformed officers entered the luxury section, their presence immediately commanding respect and attention from everyone present. The lead officer, Captain Jennifer Martinez, had worked with Marcus for 5 years and knew exactly how seriously he took customer service violations. "Mr. Williams," Captain Martinez said with professional courtesy, "we understand there's been a serious customer service incident. How would you like us to proceed?" The formal acknowledgement of Marcus's authority hit the three employees like a physical blow. Patricia actually stumbled backward, her face showing the full realization that this wasn't a nightmare she could wake up from. Jake's confident posture crumpled as he understood that the man he had threatened to arrest was the person who ultimately controlled his employment. Robert's attempts at damage control died in his throat as he watched his career evaporate in real time. Marcus addressed the security team with the calm professionalism that had built his business empire, but his words carried the finality of a judge delivering a verdict. These three employees have violated every customer service protocol we've established. They've engaged in discriminatory behavior, made false accusations, refused to process legitimate transactions, and created a hostile environment for customers. I want them escorted from the premises immediately, and I want their access credentials revoked before they leave the building. The gathering crowd of customers began recording even more intensively, understanding they were witnessing corporate justice delivered with unprecedented speed and decisiveness. Several people were live streaming the confrontation, and Marcus could see the view counts climbing rapidly as the story spread across social media in real time. Patricia broke down completely, tears streaming down her face as the full weight of her actions crashed over her. "Please, Mr. Williams, I have 2 children and a mortgage. I was just doing what I thought was right. I can change, I can learn. Please don't destroy my life over one mistake."
The plea might have been moving if Marcus hadn't spent the last hour documenting a systematic pattern of discrimination that suggested this was far from Patricia's first offense. "Patricia, this wasn't one mistake. This was 30 minutes of calculated discrimination, false accusations, and racist assumptions. You didn't just treat me badly, you created an environment where other customers felt uncomfortable and unwelcome. You've been doing this to people who look like me for who knows how long, and the only difference today is that you got caught." Jake tried a different approach, attempting to appeal to Marcus's business sense. "Mr. Williams, sir, we were trying to protect your assets. Loss prevention is a real concern in retail, and we were just being cautious about suspicious behavior." Marcus's response was swift and devastating. "Suspicious behavior? Jake, let me tell you what suspicious behavior actually looks like. Suspicious behavior is following a customer who hasn't done anything wrong. Suspicious behavior is refusing to process a valid credit card without attempting the transaction. Suspicious behavior is 3 employees ganging up on one customer based solely on his appearance. You weren't preventing loss, you were creating liability and driving away legitimate customers." Robert made one final desperate attempt to save his position. "Mr. Williams, I take full responsibility for my team's actions. If you're going to fire anyone, fire me and give them another chance. They were following what they thought was proper procedure." The offer was meaningless because Marcus had already decided all 3 fates, but Robert's attempt at nobility was undermined by the fact that he had been the most aggressive participant in the discrimination. "Robert, you don't get to play the martyr after spending 30 minutes insulting me and authorizing my harassment. You told me that corporate would back you up 100% when you discriminated against people like me. Well, I am corporate, and I'm backing you up right out the door." Captain Martinez stepped forward with termination paperwork that had been prepared with remarkable efficiency. "Patricia Chen, Jake Morrison, Robert Kane, you are hereby terminated from Williams Retail Group effective immediately. You have 10 minutes to collect personal items from your workstations under security escort, and your final paychecks will be processed according to company policy." The 3 former employees were escorted away in stunned silence, their careers ending not with retirement parties or farewell celebrations, but with the long walk of shame past customers who had recorded their professional destruction.
But Marcus wasn't finished addressing the situation, because firing 3 people was only the beginning of the transformation he had in mind. What happened next would turn this single incident into a catalyst for industry-wide change that would protect countless future customers from experiencing the humiliation that Marcus had endured.
But firing 3 discriminatory employees was only the beginning of Marcus's plan, because what happened over the next 30 days would transform not just one store, but an entire approach to customer service that would be studied in business schools for years to come. The real story wasn't about revenge, it was about redemption and creating lasting change. Marcus turned to address the crowd of customers who had witnessed the entire confrontation, many still recording with their phones, their faces showing a mixture of satisfaction and amazement at the justice they had just observed. His voice carried the authority of a leader, but also the warmth of someone who understood that this moment was bigger than just one incident. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you for being witnesses to something that should never happen in any business. What you saw today is exactly why I opened these stores 20 years ago. To create spaces where every customer, regardless of their appearance, background, or the clothes they're wearing, would be treated with dignity and respect. Today, we failed that mission, but I promise you we're going to do better. The customers responded with spontaneous applause, understanding they had witnessed not just corporate accountability, but a genuine commitment to change. Several people approached Marcus to share their own stories of discrimination in retail settings, creating an impromptu forum for discussing respect and dignity in customer service. Over the following 30 days, Marcus implemented what he called the Dignity Protocol, a comprehensive program that would become a model for retail companies across the country. The transformation began immediately and was documented through social media posts that went viral, showing the step-by-step process of building a truly inclusive retail environment. The first change was mandatory bias training for every employee in the Williams Retail Group. But this wasn't the typical corporate workshop that employees endured and forgot. Marcus brought in civil rights leaders, psychologists who specialized in unconscious bias, and most powerfully, customers who had experienced discrimination in retail settings. The training sessions were filmed and shared widely, creating a resource that other companies began requesting. The second innovation was the implementation of secret shoppers from diverse backgrounds who would visit stores unannounced to test customer service standards. But these weren't typical mystery shoppers looking for cleanliness and efficiency. These were individuals specifically trained to identify discriminatory behavior, microaggressions, and differential treatment based on appearance. The program was so effective that it was adopted by 3 major retail chains within 6 months. The third element was the installation of a customer respect monitoring system that went far beyond typical security cameras. The system used artificial intelligence to analyze customer interactions, identifying patterns of behavior that suggested discrimination or bias. When potential issues were flagged, managers received immediate alerts and were required to intervene in real time. The technology was groundbreaking, but what made it revolutionary was Marcus's decision to make the monitoring data transparent. Monthly reports were published showing customer satisfaction scores broken down by demographic groups, average service times, and interaction quality measurements. The transparency created accountability that extended throughout the entire organization. The human cost of the discrimination was also addressed through industry blacklisting that sent a clear message about consequences. Patricia, Jake, and Robert found themselves unable to secure employment in retail management anywhere in the region. Word spread quickly through professional networks about their behavior, and the video footage of their discrimination became a cautionary tale that was shared in employee training programs across multiple industries. But Marcus's vision extended beyond punishment to genuine rehabilitation.
He established a second chance program for employees who demonstrated discriminatory behavior, offering comprehensive bias education and community service opportunities in exchange for the possibility of future employment consideration. The program was voluntary, rigorous, and required participants to complete 200 hours of community service in diverse neighborhoods, working directly with the communities they had previously discriminated against. The flagship Chicago store became a showcase for inclusive retail practices. Marcus personally greeted customers during busy periods, sharing his story and the store's commitment to equal treatment. The walls displayed a customer respect charter that outlined specific commitments to dignity, fairness, and inclusive service. Customer feedback stations were installed throughout the store, with responses guaranteed within 24 hours. The transformation results were dramatic and measurable. Customer satisfaction scores increased by 40% within the first quarter. Sales revenue grew by 25% as word spread about the store's commitment to treating all customers with respect. Most importantly, discrimination complaints dropped to 0 across all Williams Retail Group locations. The story spread far beyond the retail industry. Marcus was invited to speak at conferences about corporate leadership and social responsibility. The Dignity Protocol was featured in Harvard Business Review as a case study in crisis management and organizational change. Other CEOs began implementing similar programs, creating a ripple effect that improved customer service standards across multiple industries. 6 months after the incident, Marcus returned to the same luxury section where he had been discriminated against, but this time he came as himself, in his usual business attire. The difference was immediately apparent. The new staff, led by manager Carmen Rodriguez, approached him with genuine warmth and professionalism that had nothing to do with recognizing him as the CEO and everything to do with treating every customer as valuable. The ultimate vindication came when the store received recognition as Retailer of the Year from the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People for its commitment to inclusive customer service. The award ceremony was held in the same luxury section where Marcus had been called a thief, with hundreds of customers, employees, and community leaders celebrating the transformation. During his acceptance speech, Marcus shared the lesson that had emerged from his painful experience. Sometimes the person you underestimate is the person who controls your future. But more importantly, every person who walks through your doors deserves to be treated with dignity, respect, and humanity, regardless of who they are or who you think they might be. The story of Marcus Williams didn't just end 3 careers and transform 1 company. It started a nationwide conversation about respect, dignity, and the assumptions we make based on appearance. Most importantly, it proved that sometimes justice comes not through revenge, but through the patient work of building a better world where discrimination has no place to hide. Today, the Williams Retail Group stands as proof that businesses can be both profitable and principled, that customer service can be both efficient and equitable, and that one person's courage to demand better treatment can create change that protects countless others from experiencing the same humiliation and discrimination. The transformation that followed Marcus Williams' experience proves something powerful. Discrimination isn't just morally wrong, it's catastrophically bad for business. 3 employees lost their careers in 30 minutes, but their legacy became the foundation for changes that now protect millions of customers across the retail industry. The Dignity Protocol that Marcus created didn't just prevent future discrimination, it increased profits by 40% and turned his stores into destinations that customers actively seek out because they know they'll be treated with respect. Here's what Marcus taught us that goes far beyond retail. Every person you encounter could be the person who changes your life, for better or worse. Patricia, Jake, and Robert made assumptions based on appearance and paid the ultimate professional price. But Marcus chose transformation over revenge, creating systems that ensure no customer would ever experience what he endured. That's the difference between a victim and a visionary. The real lesson isn't about hidden CEOs or dramatic reveals. It's about the power of treating every human being with dignity, regardless of how they look, where they come from, or what assumptions you might make about their circumstances. Because respect isn't something you give based on someone's title or bank account, it's something you give because they're human, and that humanity deserves recognition. Marcus Williams turned his moment of humiliation into an industry-wide revolution. His story reminds us that change happens when good people refuse to accept discrimination as normal, when leaders take responsibility for creating better systems, and when ordinary customers like those who recorded this incident decide to bear witness rather than look away. If this story moved you, if it made you think about how you treat others or how you've been treated, hit that like button right now, because stories like this need to be shared. Drop a comment and tell us about a time you witnessed someone stand up to discrimination, or when respect made a difference in your life. And subscribe to our channel, because we're committed to sharing more stories about people who refuse to accept injustice, who transform pain into purpose, and who prove that sometimes the most powerful response to hate is building a better world. Your subscription helps us find and tell these stories that remind us why dignity, respect, and human decency will always win in the end.